The U.S. is facing rising consumer prices and supply chain problems. Americans are seeing increasing costs for food, energy, and housing.
New data from overseas shows imports into the U.S. are down since the tariff war started, while exports to other countries are quickly climbing.
This means major powers such as China and India are finding other markets for their products. Madeline Rivera has more from Washington.
In early 2025, Washington sketched a bold vision of an America thriving on its own strength, fueled entirely by homegrown resources. Yet that dream is hitting harsh realities. A fresh executive order has rolled back tariffs on key imports like nickel, graphite, and pharmaceuticals, acknowledging that U.S. industries still rely heavily on foreign supplies. For automakers and manufacturers, it's a matter of survival or collapse. So, who gains from this abrupt policy shift? And how far could its effects ripple through global markets and everyday costs? At the start of 2025, Washington quietly pivoted. The ambitious goal of a self-sufficient America, untethered from global supply chains, is bending to practical needs. A broad executive order has cut tariffs on dozens of critical imports, marking a retreat from last year's rigid trade policies. Over 45 categories, from nickel and gold to pharmaceutical ingredients, rare magnets, and high-efficiency LEDs for clean energy, now face exemptions. This shift, driven by necessity rather than politics, admits that the U.S. industrial base still depends on global inputs. These exemptions, however, come with conditions. Their leverage, offered only to nations willing to negotiate reciprocal trade deals. For automakers reliant on these materials, this could decide who thrives and who fails. The move exposes a stark gap between political goals and industrial realities, revealing how deeply America's prosperity remains tied to the global networks it once sought to break free from. The core issue is clear. The U.S. consumes far more raw materials than it can produce. Modern industries, particularly automotive and clean energy, depend on an intricate mix of minerals and metals that domestic sources can't fully provide. The auto sector feels this most acutely. The electric vehicle surge, hailed as the future of the economy, demands vast quantities of graphite, nickel, and lithium. In 2024, the U.S. used 52,000 tons of natural graphite, all imported, with over 90% of global processing controlled by China. Even when sourced elsewhere, graphite often passes through Chinese plants before reaching American factories. The auto industry bears the heaviest burden. Every car relies on thousands of components, often crossing multiple borders before assembly. Each new tariff adds costs to an already delicate balance. By 2025, auto tariffs reached 25%, with steel and aluminum duties at 50%. Analysts estimate this adds $18 billion in costs for U.S. automakers this year alone. For consumers, that means American-made cars cost about $5,000 more, with imported models up by as much as $8,500. These aren't just figures. They reflect mounting pressure on companies and buyers in an industry reshaped by top-down policies. To keep prices manageable, automakers have absorbed costs, cutting profits, simplifying models, and burying fees in contracts to avoid shocking buyers. But these measures have limits. Electric and luxury vehicles, which depend more on imported parts, will soon see higher prices as margins shrink. Industry leaders are split. Some see the tariff exemptions as a temporary fix, while others argue that erratic trade policies cause more damage than the tariffs themselves. This uncertainty has become its own economic force, testing how much instability manufacturers can withstand before losing their edge globally. The real winners and losers hinge on which countries secure favorable deals with Washington. The administration's stance is firm. Tariff relief is for those who reciprocate. This has sparked a scramble among trading partners to protect their industries. The EU and Japan quickly locked in deals, lowering auto tariffs to about 15%. South Korea followed, pledging U.S. investments for reduced duties. India, once hit with 50% tariffs due to its oil ties with Russia, is negotiating to cut rates to 15%. Taiwan is making similar headway. These deals are reshaping global competition overnight. Automakers from countries with better terms gain an edge, while those left out face higher costs. This uneven landscape disrupts an industry built on long-term planning, forcing companies to bet on shifting policies. Production sites, investments, and even car designs are now as much about diplomacy as engineering. Trade, once driven by efficiency, has become a geopolitical game.